Hi, welcome back to part two of the nuts and bolts of homeschooling. Again, my name is Shari McMinn, and I'm friends with Donna O'Leary. We met working on Tim Tebow's Night to Shine committee, and I'm just happy to share my homeschooling knowledge with you ladies on her rural heart, and I hope this is a blessing to you. In the first session, we went over a number of different things about preparing your home and preparing your students, and touched on curriculum and schedules and routines. And I want to start the second half with an explanation of what I call the knowledge retention pyramid. And if you can picture the pyramids of Giza, for instance, and at the top there's a small area, and if it was a learning styles and teaching methods pyramid, it would have a lecture as the first top of the pyramid. And when learners of all styles hear a lecture, they only retain 5% usually of the lecture. That's pretty sad, isn't it? And the next level down is when you actually are reading notes while the lecture is being presented, then you will learn up to 10 or 15%. If it's an audiovisual presentation, so there's graphics, then your knowledge retention goes up to about 25%. If there's a demonstration involved where the person who's giving the lecture and you're reading the screen and seeing the graphics and probably taking notes, note taking really helps you retain what you've learned. Then if the presenter gives a demonstration, and in this presentation of mine, I often do this neat demonstration where I have two empty jars, and one of them is filled to the top with corn kernels. And then the other jar has 3 tennis balls in it, and the tennis balls represent, number 1, your relationship with God. The second tennis ball is number 2, your relationship with your family. And number 3 is homeschooling. So then I take those tennis balls and I put the God one in with the corn, and it fits. And then I put the one that's about your family, I put that in, and it kind of fits. And then I take the third ball about homeschooling, and it doesn't fit at all. It just sits at the top of the other 2 balls and the corn. So what I teach people is you need to take the God tennis ball and put it into the empty jar first. That's your number 1 priority. Then the number 2 ball is your family, especially your marriage. And then the number 3 ball is homeschooling. And all the balls fit in the other jar with no corn kernels added to it yet. Then you pour the corn kernels into the jar, and they miraculously now all fit. They fit in between all the tennis balls. And those are the other things in your life, like laundry and cooking and child rearing and going to the grocery store and working your job and all those little corn kernels that weigh down your life. So if you start with the jar full of corn kernels, the priorities of God and family and homeschooling are not going to fit. But if you fill an empty jar with those 3 priority tennis balls, then pour all the other corn kernels on top of that, everything will fit. So that's how I want you to think about homeschooling. And that's also how I want you to think about the learning pyramid. So once you get down to halfway down on the pyramid where there's a demonstration, you retain upwards of 30 to 40% of what you've learned. Then in the diagram graphic that I use, the rest of the wide base of the pyramid is in red. And I encourage people that this is the area you need to enter with homeschooling, teaching your children. So where there's group discussion, there are going to be 50% retention. Where there's practice by doing, there's going to be 75% retention. And where there's teaching others, there'll be 90% retention. So using this as a model to describe how I teach my children, we try to always have group discussion about different things. And I said, that can be around the dinner table. It could be while you're taking a walk. It doesn't have to be a formal setting. But when you bring up important subject matter and you discuss it with your kids and they share what they've learned, then they're going to remember 50% of it. And then practice by doing. My kids, the one extracurricular activity they do is 4-H. And so they practice by doing what they learn in 4-H, and then they retain 75%. So if it's a baking project, a livestock project, a STEM project like building model rockets, they retain 75% of what they've learned because they're working with their hands to actually do the project. And then when they give a demonstration at their 4-H club meeting at the end of the calendar year, which is always required before we do fair, they teach others and they retain 90%. So just like I'm teaching you, that helps me retain 90% of what I have learned. And so I want you to, in your homeschool, not just give your kids a textbook and say, go read it. I want you to talk with them about it, have them put it into practice, use their hands, make a project off of it, and then teach you, if no one else. But younger siblings, they're good to teach. And then they will retain 90% of what they've learned. And this is a very, very important learning retention or knowledge retention model to remember. So think about that as you're working with your kids in homeschool. Then the next topic I want to talk about is the teaching methods. So we talked a little bit about curriculum and learning styles, but teaching methods is really an important thing, and that's based more on you as the parent and how you're teaching your child. And all of us are different. And so some of us like teaching out of a textbook. Some of us like teaching by the way, we're just sitting around the table and I'm teaching and kids are learning. And it's really how you and your husband, how you're built emotionally and socially. And you can take tests online to kind of learn more about yourself. But these basically are the core of teaching methodologies which are used in homeschooling. And these are in alphabetical order, not in priority order. So the Charlotte Mason method is about atmosphere, discipline, and life. And Charlotte Mason was an a wise English woman, and so the methodology is named after her. And again, each of these things you can just go online and engine search, and you'll learn more about them. But the basics of Charlotte Mason method are atmosphere, discipline, and life. And a lot of people say you use what's called living books to teach that, not textbooks. So living books are usually by one author and they're on a subject. Then the next methodology is the classical style. And that's where children devour facts, and then in middle school, they evaluate the facts, and then as they're in high school, they apply knowledge. So that's, some people would call that logic and rhetoric. And if you feel like you're going to have a lawyer in your family because all that child wants to do is debate you, then perhaps classical style is a good way to teach that child, and using Latin as a basis for vocabulary and other concepts. And then there are correspondence and online schools that are taught by video and DVD, and certainly all the major homeschool curriculum publishers at this point in time do that. So Abeka, Apologia, AOP, all of them have some sort of a video or DVD course. But again, that's a lot of screen time. So what are you going to do to supplement it? And then there's the eclectic approach, and that's some of everything. And people who have been homeschooling a long time, like myself, that's really what we do. We use what we like and what we're comfortable with, and we tailor that to our children's learning styles. Then the Montessori approach, I've mentioned that before, and the details of that include self-directed activity, hands-on learning, and collaborative play. Then there is a methodology called multi-level, which is different than individual level. So individual level is you get a textbook for your second grader and a different one for your fourth grader and a different one for your 10th grader. But the multi-level approach means you take a curriculum, like one that comes to mind is My Father's World, and you teach everything to all your kids except the mechanics of reading, writing, and arithmetic. So one curriculum package teaches all of your kids about science, history, Bible, geography, all those other subjects besides the 3 R's. And then you get grade level or age level specific reading, writing, and arithmetic packages for those things. And so in a multi-level school, you will read out loud to everybody, maybe say you were doing a study of the Middle Ages. And then you would help kids, dress up in costume or make paper mache maps of castles, that kind of thing. And then the older kids would extend their learning by maybe doing more research and writing a paper. Then the principal approach is about applying God's biblical principles to all areas of education. And Generations is a great curriculum provider that uses the principal approach. So books that are written about science and history are all based on biblical scripture. And the Bible really teaches on just about everything. You can learn about architecture from studying how the Israelites built the temple. So the principal approach, the main textbook is the Bible, and then filled in around that are other books and learning resources. Then the traditional textbook approach is like the traditional schoolroom. So it might be books that are used in a Christian private school. And the first publishers that made textbooks for Christian schools that started selling to homeschool families back in the 1970s and 80s, the very first one was Abeka. And Abeka is produced by Pensacola Christian College. And it's a very good textbook-based program. And our family has used history and science books from Abeka. So that's where you get a traditional textbook for each age level of your child. So maybe you have 2 kids. One's 8, one's 13. So you're going to buy, 3rd grade level and 10th grade level textbooks from one publisher. And then unit studies is a very popular methodology among homeschoolers, especially when kids are in the elementary and middle school years. And a unit study is where you pick a topic that your family is interested in, and then you learn everything about that, and you base your math learning, your English learning, your science, your history, everything on that particular topic. So one year, probably about 20 some years ago, a movie came out, an IMAX movie came out on beavers. And so our family did a unit study about beavers, and it was so fun and so interesting. And we learned a lot from picture books, but also science and nature books. We went on a couple field trips to where beavers were actually building dams. And then the culmination of it was to go watch the IMAX Beaver movie. And we had already learned a lot. And when we saw that, it was just thrilling because it reinforced everything. So that's called a unit study. So again, those different methodologies you can look up are the Charlotte Mason method, classical style, correspondence or online schools, the eclectic approach, the Montessori approach, the multi-level approach, the principal approach, the traditional textbook, and the unit study approach. So specific curriculum under teaching methods, if you will just go to your engine search and type in classical style homeschool resources, then you will find Veritas Press, Memoria Press, and Classical Conversations will come up. And then you can read all about that. If you thought you liked the principal approach, then you can look that up. Principal approach, homeschooling textbook resources, and see what comes up. So the internet's just a wonderful way to investigate that. There's a lot of people that struggle with math, and I think it's because they hated the way math was taught to them when they were young. Math, I love math. I'm a math person because I see math is the language that God speaks in his universe with science. And math is super practical for life. You know, it's important to know how to budget. It's important to figure out interest rates. One of my jobs I do, I get paid commissions on it. So I always like to calculate my commission as soon as I've made a sale. And that involves math. And I think that when you're picking out math curriculum, it's probably the one thing that you need to really tailor to the type of learner that your child is. So if you will look at Kathy Duffy's top 102 picks, you'll read about different math curriculums. The most popular ones are Abeka, Matthew C., ACE School of Tomorrow. That's what our family uses. It stands for Accelerated Christian Education. Singapore Math. Then there's also teaching textbooks, The Life of Fred, Making Math Meaningful, Right Start Math. I mean, there's just tons of math curriculum providers. And then there's also free math on the internet. So you can go to Khan Academy or AAA Math, and you can just download worksheets on that. You can maybe kind of test to see what their level is at. If you have recently pulled your child out of institutional school, you'll have their math work to look at to see if they're at fractions, decimals, simple arithmetic, or they're starting to do pre-algebra where they figure out formulas with X, and you can start there. A really great website I like, and I mentioned before, is Christian Book Distributors, because you can go to that site and you can look up homeschool, and then you can look up math, and it'll bring several things up, and you can look at fifth grade, so to speak. And they have what's called See Inside, and probably some of you already know about this, but you click on the See Inside, and you can look at the first few pages of those work texts or textbooks, workbooks, and see what level they're teaching at. And then based on what you think your child is doing, you can even order a sample or one small thing to try it out and see. And again, this is a great thing to ask other people that are homeschooling about math options. I want to encourage you that if you hate math and think you can't do math, that you just have a different view of it and think of it that you're going to learn math right along with your kids and do it in an enjoyable way. And I think 15 minutes of working on a math assignment together with your child each day, it's like piano lessons. It's horrible at first, but after you practice for 15, then 20, then 30 minutes every day over the years, by the time you graduate high school, you are a gifted pianist and you can get a scholarship to college. And I think it's very similar with math. There's a lot of free curriculum resources, and I think you can just, again, engine search that. I think free stuff is good, but somebody is paying for the free stuff. Somebody had to make it, and somebody wants to sell it and get money for the item and their time. So I think it's fine to use free sources for different things, but then at some point in time, I'd like you to jump on board and actually buy curriculum from reputable producers. I'm going to name some catalogs that I think are good for you to request. And again, you can just go online to these different sites and request a catalog. So Apologia has excellent science. They have other things too, but Apologia. And then I already mentioned Christian Book Distributors. Then Memoria Press is a classical publisher, and they now have video text math, which is really good. So that's Memoria Press. And then My Father's World is one of those all-in-one, all ages kind of thing. So if you have a bunch of stair-step kids, you got a 9 and a 7 and a 5 and a 3-year-old, you might want to think about that. And then Rainbow Resource is a huge, very thick, probably 2-inch thick catalog that, like Kathy Duffy's book, they review absolutely everything. And you can't order anything from Kathy Duffy's book, but you can from Rainbow Resource. So if I was just going to order one catalog and jump in, I would find the Rainbow Resource website and order their catalog. Then I want to talk a little bit about special needs and struggling learners. One of the things that I love about homeschooling is it helps every type of learner, from highly gifted to middle of the road to kids who just are struggling or have special needs. And I have had every one of those kind of kids in my family, and I was so glad that I was able to tailor our homeschool learning environment to each of them. So homeschooling works well for these kids, and it can be done. Your home environment is much more protected and nurturing than a public or private school environment where there's issues with bullying, or the classroom goes too fast, and so then the student has to be put in the special ed classroom, and then he feels terrible and suffers from low self-esteem. You don't have to deal with that in homeschool. It's less chaotic and less stressful, and it's more focused on what your student needs to learn. There are lots of places where you can get information, including HSLDA, and there's a great resource called nathan.com, and that is spelled NATHHAN.com. They, for many years, published a huge newsletter that was aimed toward, really in the beginning, what we would call mentally retarded children, although we don't really use that term anymore. Down syndrome children, children who are just maybe learning at a slower rate or an outside the box rate, and it's a very encouraging place. And then there's also Facebook groups for parents of struggling learners. There's online forums that you can join. And then I really encourage you, if in your area, of course you can't do it now because of coronavirus, but maybe in the fall, you try to find a local support group in your area. And for that, we go 30 miles to town a couple times a month to be in our homeschool support group, and it's really worth it. And there's a number of families there that have special needs and struggling learners kids, and so they can all make friends with each other, they can get encouragement, and they can just be met where they're at in their learning journey, and they can have friends that are just like them. So I really encourage you to find a local support group. And then you can consider private consultations. There's a lot of special education teachers, also speech and hearing therapists. There's just a lot of resources out there that you can tap into. I know that for my adopted kids, we had a Medicaid from the state of Colorado that paid for them to get speech therapy and mental health therapy and other things that help them in their struggles. So it might be that you have private insurance that'll pay for it, or your state has something to offer. You can always get testing done at a children's hospital. I think that it's important you really observe your child and figure out what you think their issues are. And even if you can't put a professional label on that, you at least can speak to somebody and say, I think my child might be dyslexic, or I think my child is having hearing problems, or I think my child needs eyeglasses. And then go and find the help that you need for that. Evaluate your child's strengths and weaknesses and search out curriculum especially pertaining to their weak areas to make progress. So we talked about learning styles very briefly. We talked about auditory, visual, and kinesthetic. And when you are teaching a struggling learner, you really should, for all your students, you should teach all of those learning styles. But if they're having a specific problem, then you need to teach that specific subject. Maybe it's reading, or maybe it's math. You need to use their learning style when you're teaching that, because they'll retain more information. Okay, considerations for special needs and struggling students. So begin at their ability level, not their grade level. So perhaps you have a fifth grader who is not reading. And can I tell you that all my kids are really smart, and only half of them read at second grade, and some of them didn't read till seventh or ninth grade. So everybody learns to read when their eyes and their brain are ready. So with every subject, start where they're at, not the expected grade level. Be realistic and start low for quick success, which builds their confidence. So maybe they don't know their multiplication tables yet. So start off by doing some remedial work with addition and subtraction so that they know how to do that, and then start working on multiplication. Be consistent. Slow and steady wins the race. So you really do want to do 15 minutes a day, 5 days a week, 9 months out of the year, and you will see success. It is really daunting and really hard to persevere with a struggling student day after day, year after year. And I can tell you that I had a child who struggled with math so badly for so many years. It was just painful. That child would cry, throw a fit, run off from the table, and I would just be beyond my ability to deal with it. But this year, the light bulb went on, and that child did like 10 years of math in 1 year. And so you just have to be patient. Be encouraging and compliment your children 7 times for every one correction. And I know that is so hard, but it applies in school subjects. It applies with household chores. It applies with piano lessons and what they pick out to wear. Everything. 7 encouragements to 1 correction. Get a baseline of where your child is and start from there. So if your child is coming home from public or institutional school, you have their latest test scores or the books that they've been working in, and that's the base of knowledge from which you're going to build. If they haven't been to school and you're just starting homeschooling, then you start building that baseline, such as my child is in kindergarten and he knows the letters of the alphabet and he knows the numbers up to 100. That's a baseline. Or in 5th grade, my child reads 3rd grade level reading books, but he loves science and he can understand 9th grade science concepts. Do short teaching times interspersed with exercise, hands-on learning, and snack and water. It sounds really too simple, but snack and water are so important for our brains to function. And actually, fat is really important. Good, healthy fats like fat in milk and literally pork fat found in bacon and pork are really good for our brains and especially our kids' brains. You know, if you breastfed your child, they got a lot of fat in that milk, and that really helped what's called the midline of their brain between the two hemispheres. That needs fat in order to really help your brain function. So drinking water every 15 minutes, a few sips, having a snack in the middle of the morning, going out for a walk to get fresh air and exercise, these things stimulate our brain and our bodies to function together to learn. And it's really helpful for kids, especially if they're struggling. Use alternative evaluation methods versus standardized testing. So I don't know where you live, but in Colorado, we do have to every other year provide some sort of evaluation or standardized test on our homeschool kids. And when my husband was alive, he was a college professor. And because he was credentialed, he was able to provide a written narrative on the progress of my children at the end of the year. He was considered a, somebody who had the credentials to do that. Then when he died, I thought, oh, we need to do something different. So we belong to what's called an umbrella school, and they require either a standardized test or you can fill out a lengthy 11-page parent evaluation, which is a narrative on your child's progress in each subject. The books you're using, the teaching methodology, how your child's progressing, if there's some shortcomings, what are you going to do for next year? And so that's what I do, and it's a really, really great thing. I just absolutely love it. And it helps me really think about how my child is doing and how I can help them better the next year. And because I know my child better than anybody else, it means the most. Don't be afraid to learn and use cutting-edge technology to help your struggling learners. And this is where I say, okay, remember I said you shouldn't use screens more than 2 hours. If technology helps your struggling learner be a better learner, then do it. And you can use online resources. They can, have a laptop or some kind of device where they can have technology streamed to them so they can do their schoolwork. And I would really recommend you get a security system on your technology. We use Covenant Eyes, and you can sign up whether you want it to be child level, youth level, teen level. And I get a report every morning on my kids' devices if everything's okay or if there's a problem. And the point of it is to promote conversation between parent and child so that you're helping your kid learn to be safe on the internet. And so if you have a struggling learner that would benefit from using technology, in addition to all the other great things you're going to do, like reading aloud and audiobooks and doing hands-on learning, then you help them learn to navigate technology safely. There's a really good book that I read last year that came out a couple years ago, and it's one that I thought, man, I wish I had that 20 years ago, but it wasn't out. And there's a woman named Linda Kane who lives in, I believe in Utah, but she travels throughout the United States giving presentations. And she wrote a book called The Neurodevelopmental Approach. And her name is Linda Kane, Kane. You can look that up on Amazon. And it is a fantastic, eye-opening book about how your child's brain development starts in utero, and if they don't hit certain marks as they're growing in the womb, and then once they're born and they start crawling at 5 months, or sitting up at 5 months, crawling at 7, starting to stand up at 9 months, and especially if they are not crawling, if they're scooting and not crawling, they have not gained the right or left brain dominance that they were born with. And she advocates if you have a humongously struggling learner, you need to go back to the crawling phase, even if they're 10 or 15 years old, and you need to creep and crawl around your house with them to help them set a pattern of right hand left leg, left hand, right leg. So they're creeping and crawling back and forth and reconnecting or first time connecting those neural pathways. She did a lot of study when she has three sons and two of them had Down syndrome. And she was told at the time when they were born that they would never be, anything. Well, she refused to believe that, so she went and got an education in all this, and she and her husband worked together. And do you know, I think both of her Down syndrome sons graduated from college. Now, when you have Down syndrome, sometimes you'll die at an earlier age, and I believe one or both of her Down syndrome sons passed away in their 20s and 30s, but they had a great life. And she practiced a lot of these things that she teaches, and it really made a difference. So, again, the neurodevelopmental approach by Linda Kane. And then I talked to you earlier about how our family did a lot of things outside the box of textbook learning. And I just want to go over a list of some things that might trigger in your mind some ideas for you. I think that learning outside the textbook box is the best part of homeschooling. And it's fun and it sticks, the learning sticks, and it builds relationships, which is the most important aspect. So, animal husbandry, if you have a rural property with animals, I'm so excited for you because it's just so great. To see those baby calves born in the spring. They're just so cute. And when they kick up their tail and their heels and they run off together, it's just the most darling thing. For 25 years, we raised rabbits, and the baby rabbits are so precious. So animal husbandry, you just teach everything. It's math, it's science, it's biology, it's reproduction, and it's also just a great builder for responsibility and consistency in chores. I think that kids who grow up on a farm have a great work ethic as an adult, but they also know how precious life is, and they will take really good care of their family and your future grandchildren. If your child is interested in something that they can get an apprenticeship in, I would recommend that. We had some family friends, and their son was kind of a struggling learner. I think he had a brain injury as a child, and life was just always kind of difficult for him. But he loved the art of taxidermy, and he would call us and say, "Do you have any dead rabbits or dead chickens?" And he learned on his own to do beautiful, incredible taxidermy. And he, at one point, went started working as an apprentice for a taxidermist, and now that's what he does for his job professionally. So apprenticeships are a great thing. Board games that challenge the mind and build relationships, like Monopoly. That didn't build my relationship with my husband, but it did with my kids. So just really encourage board games. Family vacations, field trips, hobby crafting with parents, grandparents, and supportive elders. If you go to a church and, not right now, but later after coronavirus, and you start going to church again, and there's some older women who do knitting and crocheting that your daughters can learn from. Of course, sons can too. But and then there's some older men who work on cars, or maybe they love to hunt, do things. I really encourage you to ask them if they would pair up with your kids to teach them if you don't have grandparents available to do that. My parents live a long way away, and my husband's parents did too. So we reached out to older people in our neighborhood and in our church to kind of come alongside and just spend time with our kids like that. Interesting people and family members. I always loved visiting with my in-laws and my parents as well, and asking them stories about the old days. And the kids might act kind of bored, but on the way back home in the car, they remembered what was said, and it's just so good. Anytime you can meet up with a war veteran, or maybe somebody who's retired that had a really successful, interesting business, uh, ask them questions about what they did, and your kids can listen in. It's good to go to libraries and museums, and uh, it's also super important to let your kids just play. Unstructured playtime, and that now is called, that's a homeschooling methodology called wild and free, where you send your kids outside and you just let, or they're down the basement or whatever, and you check on them every 15 minutes, but they're just kind of left to their own devices, and it really helps them figure out how to fill their time. It's good for kids to get bored and not always rely on a screen. One fun thing that we did for my sons is we would go to a thrift store and we would buy old appliances like toasters and can openers and things like that, and we put them in our shop building, which you might have a garage or a shop, and we let them take them apart, and then we challenged them to put them back together. And they did the same with old vehicles, and it was really a great way to learn about mechanics. So I encourage reading over television and screens. You know, if you can get your kids to learn to love books, and even if they love comic books, that's okay because they're still reading. Just make sure that they're, age appropriate. And then, even though I don't advocate screens, there are so many neat documentaries and videos on YouTube. We watched a really, really neat one about a town in Belgium where every once a year they saddle up their huge draft horses and put these giant hand woven baskets on them, and they walk them out into the ocean to get shrimp. And it was so fascinating. And then we watched another one about a windmill in Holland that ran a sawmill. So there's just all kinds of neat things you can look up that don't include country western videos. So I challenge you to enjoy that. And then again, just do neat things like we did Civil War balls and mission trips and visiting our relatives, and each of my kids kind of picked something that they loved, and they spent a lot of time doing it. If you are bringing your child home from school, you'll want to help them understand that, I'm just getting to a screen here, that school at home is not like school in an institutional building. It has its own rhythm and routine, and you're the parent but you're also the teacher, and so you, and maybe dad is also a teacher or the principal, and you are to be regarded as such while school is going on. And your kid may butt heads with you, and you just have to stand firm and say, well, I'm sorry, I'm the teacher and I'm telling you that you need to do this, or you're going to lose privileges, and I really don't want to take privileges away from you, but I need to get your schoolwork done by this certain time, and you need to, finish this math page or whatever. So I think first, if you share your heart with your child and explain why you've chosen to homeschool, they will understand that you love them, and this is going to be a really great thing. And you're going to build relationships, and you're going to do far more wonderful, interesting things than they can learn at an institutional school. And I think there's a lot of parents who resist homeschooling, and their kids actually beg them to homeschool. I know several families right now where the parents do not want to homeschool their kids, and the kids really want to be homeschooled. If that's the case, and you finally give in, or God changes your heart, I want you to humble yourself and repent to your kids and saying, I'm sorry. You were right. We should homeschool, and so we're going to do it now. You need to start slow and focus on relationships. So if you've never done homeschooling before and you're starting now, well, first of all, do something enjoyable together that you guys like to do. In fact, if your child likes to do something and you're sort of like, that's not really my thing, I want you to do it with them anyway. If your child likes to go fishing, then you go fishing. If your child likes to play Scrabble or work on a puzzle till midnight, I want you to do that. And then I want you to find something you like to do and ask your child to join you in that, whether it's gardening. going for a horseback ride, something that might not be their first choice, but it's your first choice. So get to know each other and your choices about what you like, and that helps build relationship. Ask many questions and rebuild your connection. Ask what they want to learn, and then build your core subjects around their interests. So, you don't have to teach a certain topic of science in a certain grade level. If your kids are interested in astronomy, then do it. Just do all your kids together, no matter how old they are, and start studying that and go out and look at the sky. And if you live in a rural area, there's no city light, what do I want to say? It's filtered out. So you can see, like from our farm, we can see the Milky Way. And one night we were out late at night, probably 15 years ago, icing down a horse's legs that had laminitis, and she was foundering really bad, and we eventually had to put her down. But while we were out there moaning and groaning about having to do this, we saw the aurora borealis, and I had never seen it before in my life, and I have never seen it since, and it was just breathtaking. So study the kind of science that your kids want to study. Reduce outside activities that don't foster relationships and threaten peace. And God has done that for all of us with coronavirus. He's got rid of every outside activity possible. Remember that home education is about a close relationship lifestyle, which sets the stage for lifelong learning. It's not about test scores or approval from others. And that extends to your relatives. It's really hard. Some people, their relatives are aghast that they want to homeschool. And that's okay. You just explain that these are your kids and this is what you're going to do because you think it's the best decision possible. And if they want to get on board with it, you just love to have them join you in it. Remember that the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom and knowledge. Consider the fact that Jesus Christ spent 3 years homeschooling his disciples in a learning, living, loving, serving lifestyle, and it changed the world for all eternity. So we talked about chores, and remember that work is a gift from God, and I want you to encourage your kids that it is something that they can do cheerfully and diligently, and you have to set the cheerful, diligent example. Use responsibility to build character and a work ethic, and remember that many hands make light work, and be sure to have fun or enjoy a treat when all the chores are well done. So maybe you can watch a late night movie or have ice cream sundaes or something, whatever fits your budget and what you guys like to do. All right, I talked before that I was going to mention about biblically based child training. A lot of times we think of child discipline as just spanking or timeouts or things like that. And all of those can have a part in child training, but really what we need to do is train our kids in the way they should go, and then they'll never depart from it. So first I suggest you find older, wiser mentors. Maybe you have neighbors or another family in church. All their kids are grown and their kids are neat and they're engaged and they're Christians and they're engaged in the world. I don't mean engaged to be married, but they're engaged in the world. And you think that they're good role models. And I would ask those parents for how they set up a discipline system within their home. The generations.org website that I mentioned to you about the principal approach, they have really good Bible study guides, and the one on the book of Proverbs is actually a 3-volume study guide, and I'm telling you, it'll take at least 1, if not 3 years to get through all of them. It really is an excellent child training resource, and I really recommend that. It's important that husbands and wives are on the same page with goals and the methods that they use to determine how to discipline the children and train them up in the way they should go. You know, if you have a good cop, bad cop relationship, you as a married couple need to stop it right now. You need to do whatever it takes to talk to each other and figure out when somebody breaks this house rule, this is what we're going to do. And if I am serving the punishment, you have to back me up as my spouse. This is the number one breaker of homeschoolers and marriages. And so I really encourage you right now to make sure you're on the same page. And in order to do that, you need to date each other. You used to date before you got married, and I really want you to date now. And of course, you have to stay home. So there's a couple of little suggestions I have for bringing some fun romance back in your marriage. So, number one, if you have hay bales stacked out in your rural property, you and your husband, when there's a moon out at night and the kids are in bed, you can go climb up on top of the hay bales and you can make out. And I know that works from personal experience. And another thing you can do is to go out to your garage or maybe just your driveway. Maybe you don't have any covered place where you store your car, and go get in your car and don't turn it on. I don't want you producing fumes that'll cause you to pass out, but just turn on the radio or just sit and visit, and nobody can come interrupt you. You could even lock the doors and just talk. And if you want to listen to music, great. And if you want to make out like teenagers, you can do that too. But remember, you want to have a happy marriage so that your kids love being with you and love being homeschooled, and they want to grow up and have a happy marriage. So if you are married right now and you don't have a happy marriage, I want you to really work on it. And usually it takes one person. It's just starting to be nice. If you've never seen the Kendrick brothers movie, they have several, but the one where there's the 40-day love challenge in it, you could do that, and I think it'd change your life. Unified marriages are the key to building strong families and successful homeschools. And then a few recommended books are, and this you can get on that generations.org website. And it's Family Life is the title of it. It's written by Kevin Swanson. The full title is Family Life, A Simple Guide to the Biblical Family. And that's kind of the why that you do biblical family. And then the what is a book called Intentional Parenting, and it's written by Linda Stanke, Stahnke. And it's an excellent book. I'm sure you can get it on Amazon. And it's how she, as a homeschool mom in Colorado Springs, her husband worked for Focus on the Family, how they homeschooled and raised their kids and dealt with rebellion, broken marriages of their adult children, just everything. But it is so good. She just talks about very practical ways to structure your life as a family together, and lots of suggestions about alternative corporal punishment and a lot of funny stories too. It's just a very, very good book. Again, I wish it'd been out 25 years ago, but it just came out about maybe 10 years ago. But it's very good. Intentional Parenting. And then Ted Tripp, who's a wonderful Christian author, he wrote a book called Shepherding Your Child's Heart, and it's the how. And it does talk about, how shepherds have to discipline their sheep in order to get them to stay and obey, and how we do that with children. And I think he takes a very kind and gentle approach to corporal punishment. And he does believe in spanking, as I do. I don't think it's always effective, but it should be effectively used when it's needed. So, Family Life, A Simple Guide to the Biblical Family, Intentional Parenting, and Shepherding Your Child's Heart. Now, some of you may say, well, I have little kids. How can I homeschool my older kids? So there's a couple things that you can do. First of all, you can have your kids with you. You can train them to play in an area the size of their blanket. And if you're homeschooling at the kitchen table, then make sure a couple of your lower drawers have, plastic measuring cups and things in there that they can play, and they can just be right there. You can hold them, you can body wrap them, you can have them in a swing. And of course, we don't want to have our kids in infant seats and swings all the time. They need to be out, moving their limbs so that they're learning how to crawl and do different things. And then you can put a baby gate in a room. You can put a playpen in a room, and make sure you're talking to your little child while they're playing by you. You can also have your older kids supervise little kids while they're reading on the sofa. They can be given a baby a bottle, or they can have a baby playing on the floor right next to them where they're working on their schoolwork. So be creative, and remember that our little children are a blessing. They are our future, and they should be right with us most of the time. So how can you keep them occupied? And then toddlers can be playing Play-Doh at the table with you. They can be playing with the dollhouse or Duplos, different things. So I just encourage you to have your children with you, but help them remain occupied and playfully learning as well. So if you're a single parent, I encourage you that you can homeschool. I'm a single parent. I homeschool my kids. I work from home probably 30 hours a week, and I just make it work out. I really don't have much of a personal life. For me, coronavirus didn't change much. It's not like I'm dating or going out to bars or meeting girlfriends for lunch. I mean, I just really don't do that because my 3 teenagers at home are still my top priority. And I need to supervise their homeschool, and thankfully I can work online on my computer. If you have a job that you have to go to, then it is more challenging, and you do have to find somebody to be with your kids while you're at work. But your kids can learn to be independent and learn on their own. And, really a kid's way to learn is basically just playing with quality things up until about the age of 6 or 7. And then when they're ready to sit down and start doing things in a book, perhaps you can have whoever is providing daycare for them that can help them. Maybe you can find a friend that you can trade babysitting. There's just a lot of ways. So for yourself, schedule school in between your work and other commitments. Simplify down to the basics for this season in life, only the essentials. Self-care is an essential. Plan breaks and have another adult or two who can take over to give you weekly, monthly, and annual breaks. My 30-year-old son lives at home on our farm, and he works from home on his own businesses on the computer and helps with the livestock as well. But a couple times a year, he's just here with my kids so I can go get a break, and I can go visit one of my adult kids that lives in another state. I can go on a cruise. I can, do something. Seek the Lord. With him all things are possible when he is strong. He is strong when you are weak. Be courageous, steadfast, and joyful. It will positively affect your kids for life. So it is hard being a single parent, and it's hard that, especially if you're the mom and dad's not around because dad died, or he's deployed military, or he left the family, or you've just never had a significant other and you've just always been a single parent. It's hard. And so you have to really be joyful. I'm sorry, there's a fly in here. You have to be joyful about your life and make the best with the cards you've been dealt. Search online social media groups like Christian single parent homeschoolers, and you can make some connections online. Be careful if you're a single parent that you're accountable on your computer. I always leave my office door open so that I'm never on a website I shouldn't be on. And you just have to be careful. For your students, reading, writing, and arithmetic are the basics. Add their interests and yours along with the requirements of the law, and you will provide them with an excellent homeschool education. Again, do the minimum. 4 hours a day, 172 is what I do. If they can do online learning or co-op classes, that works well. They need to be doing most of the house chores with your supervision. So while you're earning money, they need to be helping you. And that's hard when you have little kids. But if you've got kids that are age 6 and up, they can do way more than you probably think they can. Put them to work helping you in your business or starting their own business for extra money. So childcare, pet sitting, what's available in your area, raising livestock, those are all things. And then I leave you with this tip because it's my favorite book series. It's called The Little Britches series by Ralph Moody, and it really will inspire you as a single parent that you can do amazing things. And there's 7 books, and I highly recommend you read all of them aloud to your family or buy them on audio. They are the best series. We've listened to them 3 times. Okay, I want you to make sure that you find joy in your homeschool journey. There's no point in being a cranky, crabby homeschool parent, because if you are, your kids will rebel, and they will think that homeschooling was the worst possible thing ever, and they will never homeschool your grandchildren. So try to enjoy your journey. And again, if you need to find a homeschool support group, or an extended family member, or a neighbor, or people at your church, even Facebook groups, there's just a lot of encouragement there to grow your joy. This is what my teenagers wanted me to say to parents who are homeschooling or considering it. I just laughed when I heard these. No, let's see. Have fun and show kindness. Correct us gently. Don't be crabby. Look at us instead of your phone. Pay attention to us. Do schoolwork with us. Don't just assign us stuff, especially English and math. Have a daily routine and require chores to build a work ethic. And your kids may complain about chores, but once they start interacting with the rest of the world, when they get a job off of your property and they have to work with people that have a horrible work ethic, they will come home and thank you. Every single one of my kids has said, thank you for teaching us a work ethic. Don't pamper us. Be reasonable and train us. Don't have a messy house. Daily pickup and weekly cleaning make it nice to be home. We might complain about the work, but we like a clean house. Do a good job parenting and homeschooling us. Kids deserve to know Christ, have loving parents, be encouraged for their future dreams, and receive a good education which prepares us for adulthood. Don't be overly controlling or too permissive. Have a big family, but don't have lots of kids if you're not going to take care of them. Feed us nutritious food regularly and serve us enough food so our brains and bodies can function and we don't worry about food. Don't allow picky eaters. Yes! And give us a truly good education. I'm going to wrap up here just about another minute. And I want you to know that I just really appreciate your time today. I hope it's helped that we've discussed about preparing your home, your child, prioritizing your time, scheduling your day, talking about curriculum, and really stressing the importance of enjoying your homeschool journey with your family. If you need to get a hold of me for any reason, please feel free to email me. I love email because I can answer it at 2 o'clock in the morning in my pajamas. If I happen to be awake and I can't sleep, I can come check email. So my email, you can reach me through my website, which is Shari, SHARI, McMinn, MCMINN.com. Or I also have a Yahoo email address, and it is shari.mcminn@yahoo.com. And I'm just here to help support what you're trying to do. I'd love to hear from you. Email kind of makes for modern day pen pals, right? We don't have to write a long letter. We could just write a quick email. So let me know if you have any help, need any help. And again, if you want to go to chec.org or hslda.org, there's lots more resources. Thank you for your time today, and I wish you Godspeed on your homeschooling journey.